Things at Zaxby's just got sensational. Because now you can experience their signature Asian sensation flavor 3 different ways. Get that sweet, tangy, citrusy, zesty fusion of flavor rolled up in a giant wrap, drizzled on a salad with an egg roll, of course, or tossed on their famous chicken fingers. Hey, flavor this good deserves its own private menu. Or should I say, Zenu. The Asian sensation lineup, available only at Zaxby's. Who's got the sauce?
Zaxby's.
I built this business the old-fashioned way. Hard work and a whole lot of spreadsheets.
Yeah, about that, I upgraded us to Odoo. Odoo puts everything we need, sales, inventory, accounting, on one connected platform. No more juggling systems, no more headaches.
So it all works together?
Exactly.
Odoo is the all-in-one business software that makes running and passing on a business easier than ever. Take your business into the next generation. Try Odoo free at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
Happy holidays! Want to give your host a gift? Consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing the show this holiday season. It really helps the show grow. From all of us at Believe, have a Merry Christmas, everyone, and a Happy Holiday.
And what's going on, Trojan family? The Madman here. First and foremost, just wishing everyone an incredibly happy and joyous holiday season filled with laughter and great memories and happiness and joy and just wonderful time with your friends and family. It's been a minute. I haven't been on the call-in show for a couple of weeks here. I know both Tim and Ryan, all of us got lots going on in terms of kind of juggling things and personal life and families and whatnot. I took a couple of weeks off here in December after a rather hectic year, both personally and professionally with lots to juggle. So wanted to take a little bit of time off with the family and spend some quality time and jump in. Really missed you guys over the last few weeks, and also kind of a fun announcement, given going into 2026, kind of assessing just sort of time management and all of those types of things, and how best to sort of engage with the community here and talk all things USC football and both LA teams, which you all know I'm so passionate about. This new segment going to start on the USC LAFB channel here in 2026 called Mondays with Madman. So it's going to be me every Monday, just sort of breaking down my thoughts and analysis over the previous week of the biggest trends and biggest news associated with USC football. And so moving forward, I'm going to be kind of taking more of a step back from the call-in show with Tim, just given time and schedule, and hope to pop in with Tim and Ryan every few weeks, every few months. But that now will become Mondays with Madman, will become my segment and my contribution to this wonderful network and community that we've built with LAFB and the wonderful Trojan family. So super excited about that. I know today's not Monday. As of this recording, it's New Year's Eve, but wanted to jump on symbolically, given that it's the last day of 2025, to talk some things, USC football. So much that's happened these last few weeks. I haven't had an opportunity to sort of comment, so wanted to sort of rapid fire, much in the way this new segment will be, 4 or 5 topics, rapid fire on some of my thoughts with everything that's going on. And, first and foremost, want to start with this whole Notre Dame conversation. So much has happened over the last 15, 16 days with Notre Dame and this USC Notre Dame game. And unfortunately, this game not going to be played until at least 2030. I wanted to sort of offer my thoughts. And I think that USC did everything that they possibly could in good faith to have this game in a place where it was beneficial to USC Trojan football. And that's all you can really ask for, to do USC Notre Dame. And we've talked about it a lot, to christen the new college football season, if you will, that week 0 game, that last Saturday in August, that first Saturday in September, to really kick things off would be such a magical way to be able to kick off the college football season, but then B, also give each team the flexibility from a resume standpoint to have enough time to be able to make up if that game did not go their way. And so it was sort of this happy medium. You continue the rivalry, You do it in week 0, so you're going to get a ton of excitement and eyeballs on it. When truth be told, as much as we love the symbolism of the game, as much as that game has such deep connection to what it means to be a USC football fan, the reality of the situation is, unfortunately, this game has lost some juice over the last 20 years in terms of iconic moments, in terms of really kind of those things that really add fuel to the fire from a rivalry standpoint, as well as from a number standpoint. You've heard Ryan talk about it in great detail about the numbers and in terms of viewership relative to the other blue blood rivalries like, Michigan, Ohio State, like Alabama, Auburn, and some of these other regional rivalries in the Midwest and the South. So unfortunately, you can't get it done. And I know there's a ton going on social media right now. SC fans piling on Notre Dame fans piling on SC. And, that's all kind of part of the fun and the show and the passion of what makes college football so special. But my take on it is don't hate the player, hate the game, as the great statement was once said. And in this particular context, don't hate either team, hate the system. Because the reality of the situation is that this game is no longer advantageous for USC for all of the reasons that we talked about. We're now in one of the 2 platinum card holding conferences in college football between the Big Ten and the SEC. And we have a significant amount of marquee games every year in that conference that allow us to be able to build that resume. And so adding Notre Dame to that resume only hurts that resume in terms of trying to get into the college football playoff. And the reality of the situation is Notre Dame doesn't need SC either. I think there's such a conversation that Notre Dame actually needs SC, and that would only be true if this caveat that Notre Dame was able to sign with the college football playoff system inexplicably did not exist. But the reality is that it does exist, that if Notre Dame finishes in the top 12 of any particular season, they are guaranteed a spot in the college football playoff. And so when you have that type of a clause and that provisional carve-out for just your team and your team alone, you actually don't need the USC game anymore. All you need is a credible Power 4 game. And if you can just schedule a team that's sort of a fringe top 20, top 25 team in that slot every year, a team that's kind of middle of the pack Big 12, middle of the pack ACC, you are going to get enough of a credible game to be able to keep you in contention to be in the top 12. If you're Notre Dame, you schedule a couple marquee games early, and then you have sort of your cream puff schedule that you do, and you replace the SC game with sort of a fringe top 20, top 25 game. And guess what? You have now gamed the system for your benefit to be able to get into the college football playoff. And so this is what's so sad about this entire situation, is that the system has now created a mechanism in the way that USC is no longer incentivized to play the Notre Dame game, but Notre Dame is no longer incentivized to play the game either. And it's just such a sad state of affairs. And when we think about the 2025 season, think about the outcomes here. SC 9-3, 7-2 in the Big Ten, just as I had predicted at the beginning of the season, just out of that sort of college football playoff. Think about if SC replaced Notre Dame with a Group of 5 game, finished 10-2, 7-2 in the Big Ten, and you break down that resume and say, man, last second field goal loss to Illinois, had the lead at Notre Dame. Those are your only 2 losses, or I should say, last second loss to Illinois, and then you had such a competitive game against Oregon and lost to them, in Eugene, and you look at that sort of body of work and you're saying, but you're still a 10-win team in the Big Ten. Guess what? Chances are USC gets into the college football playoff this year. If they don't schedule Notre Dame and just replace them with a Group of 5 game, you're probably looking at USC taking that Oklahoma spot, if I'm being completely honest here. And then on the flip side, the game happened and Notre Dame still didn't get into the playoff. And so what was the benefit that Notre Dame got from beating USC? Not that much, because they didn't get into the playoff themselves. So Notre Dame doesn't get the benefit of beating USC to get into the college football playoff, and USC gets adversely penalized for losing to Notre Dame and don't get into the college football playoff. So now the winner doesn't get the requisite praise. The loser only gets a disproportionate amount of blame. It is the system. It's so unfortunate at one of the iconic blue blood rivalries of this entire sport is no more now, because the system has created an incentive structure where neither USC nor Notre Dame is incentivized to play this game. And it's just really sad. Hopefully we see what happens in 2030. Look, the whole college football landscape is going to reset here in 2030 from a media rights deal perspective. We're going to find out whether we still have 4 power conferences, whether we got 3 power conferences. Do we have a 32-team Super League? Do we have a 24-team Super League? So everything's going to get reset in 2030, which is why that 2030 date is out there to sort of revisit this. But at least over the next 4 football seasons, no USC Notre Dame. It's a travesty. It's a tragedy for all of college football. But I don't think there is a disproportionate, SC fans are obviously going to go after Notre Dame for them reneging on their word, and they did. And Notre Dame fans are going to go after the SC folks for any variety of reasons because it's a rivalry. But I think the reality is somewhere in between. The truth always is somewhere in between, that neither school really was incentivized to play this game and could find alternative ways to make the path of least resistance to be able to make the college football playoffs. So that's the SC Notre Dame topic. Switching topics here, let's talk defensive coordinator. I mean, my goodness, look at all the news that has happened over these last 72 hours with D'Anton Lynn ultimately departing now back to his alma mater, Penn State. He had this incredible flirtation last year at this time with Penn State. SC ups the salary, keeps him. He wants to stay another year, wants to be part of a build. But unfortunately, this go-around, it wasn't enough to sort of be able to entice D'Anton Lynn to be able to stay. But it's such an interesting dynamic because I think we were in a very unique spot here with D'Anton Lynn. 2 years at SC. Obviously, there was improvement, certainly, from the disaster that was the 2023 season under Alex Grinch. But I don't think we really saw the true power of the D'Anton Lynn system and scheme really humming. I think the improvement existed, but it was incremental. You went from a completely inept defense to a serviceable defense, a very average defense, at times below average, at times above average. And the bottom line is Lynn just never quite had the one piece that he needed to be able to really unlock his defensive scheme, which is that hybrid edge linebacker that you can kind of line up on all different sides of the field, line them up at edge, stunt with them, really disguise pressures with 4 and 5. And then you've got, 6 and 7 back. So you're always in that zone shell with the +1 concept on the back end. And you're always feeling like, my God, there's just no space to be able to do anything offensively. He had that in 2023 with Leatu Latu, absolute stud at UCLA, number 15 overall pick in the NFL draft. The top 15 pick from a defensive perspective is a very rare occurrence for most programs. SC's last top 15 defensive player, Leonard Williams, back in 2016. So it's been a decade. That's how rare it is to have a top 15 player from a defensive standpoint in your program. Lynn had that in Latu in 2023, never quite had that in 24 and 25. So you never really saw things unlock. And so as this negotiation started unfolding, I think SC took a step back and said, look, he's already at $2.5 million a year. We're not actually getting the results that we want and that we need that justify $2.5 million a year. So I don't think it really makes sense here to be able to re-up and counter and try and keep him. I think there's an opportunity now to sort of look elsewhere, particularly with the hot name that everyone's talking about, Pete Kwiatkowski, getting fired by Sark at Texas, him being out there, the connection to Jen Cohen in terms of the ties with Washington when Jen Cohen was there, as well as just the amount of success that he's had at Boise State, at Washington, and then at Texas over the better part of a decade. You sort of sit back and say, there's a better potentially option out there on the open market. Why should we overpay for a coach that has a ton of potential? But let's be honest here. He's only been defensive coordinator for 3 years. And his claim to fame was that 1 year at UCLA where he had an absolute stud NFL prospect. So how good is he right now? We believe very strongly that he's going to be a great coach down the line. But how good is he right now? Because our needs are much more near term than potentially what his development curve is. So you're in a very interesting place where you didn't want to sort of overplay your hand of wanting Lynn and overpay. At the same time, you didn't want to be so open about potentially moving on from him, because if something broke down in terms of the negotiations with Penn State, and obviously the buyout was an issue, but other factors that were non-USC related, if those issues start breaking down and now he's got to come back to you, that's a very awkward dynamic when you actually wanted to potentially get rid of him and now he's back with you. So it was a very kind of dicey situation there for SC, where you sort of want him, but you don't want him bad enough. If he stays, if he goes, it's going to be okay. And I think that's really the tone that you got from Lincoln Riley leading up to this game. I will say I think it was a little bit clunky in how it was handled, because all of the conversation was announcement was going to be made after the bowl game. Then things leak, and then it's being said that, okay, he's going to coach the bowl game and then move on, and then he leaves altogether. And I think that's probably where either Lincoln Riley or Jen Cohen or Chad Bowden or some combination of Riley and Cohen, I think, stepped in and said, look, if we're asking our players to fully commit to USC from a recruiting standpoint and say, once you commit to USC, you can't take any other visits, we can't do that with a coach. Because if we're saying you have to commit, but it's okay to be able to interview for other jobs, it's okay to kind of have one eye somewhere else, that's an element of hypocrisy there. You can't sort of have one set of rules for your players and can't have a different set of rules for your coaches. And I think that's where Lincoln kind of stepped in and said, you know what, if you don't want to be here, we're going to just sort of let you go. Let's make this clean. And you can't fault Lynn. He was an All-American at Penn State. You want to be able to come back home. I know there was a lot of conversation that his wife really loved SoCal, had family down here, but his heart was there. And ultimately, you got to go where your heart takes you. It was a lot closer than people realize about Lynn last year leaving. And so, now that he kind of gets that opportunity a second time, felt like he had to do it. Perhaps it was sort of destiny intervening for him from a personal standpoint. Look, we wish him nothing but the best. And I think, again, there was that delicate dance of, we don't want to overplay the hand. We also don't want to show that we don't want him, because there's also kind of a recruiting class implication there. This is the number one recruiting class, as we all know, in terms of moving forward for 2026. We don't want to spook anything. If Lynn leaves, if that pulls any particular assistant, does that disrupt this recruiting class, which is ultimately your crown jewel? You're betting the farm on this recruiting class, really turning this program around. Lincoln Riley is going to live or die with this recruiting class. And we'll get on more of that in just a second here, based on some of his comments after the Alamo Bowl. So as a result of that very, very delicate dance there, I will say it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out. Kwiatkowski is the guy everyone's talking about. There's a sense that SC is going to move very, very quickly on it. Kwiatkowski has a very interesting scheme. This it's very, very unique. When you think about it, it's like a hybrid in terms of how he thinks about the front six relative to the back five. The back five is pretty stable. He likes to have sort of five in the secondary, but how he thinks about a quote-unquote front six is very, very unique. Sometimes it's a 2-4, sometimes it's a 3-3, sometimes it's more of a traditional 4-2. And he really has two interior down linemen, and then he's got two edges that, again, are sort of hybrid edges, or can sort of play backer on either outside, strong side, weak side, but you also kind of get them in the middle of the field a little bit. So sometimes the scheme is a 2-4-5 on certain plays. Sometimes it's a 4-2-5. Sometimes it's a 3-3-5. It really comes down to the interchangeability of how he's using his two edge players, either to rush the passer directly from the edge, or dropping back in coverage in more of a backer capacity, or kind of trying to disrupt both the run as well as the pass simultaneously, get into passing lanes, getting into running gaps. So as a result of that, it's very much of a bend but don't break kind of defense. He's okay giving up yards in between the 20s, but he really makes his money on being able to hold you in the red zone to threes, and really relying on teams needing to be exceptionally precise. Because if you do a 2-4-5 in the red zone and you've got interior linemen that can hold their gaps and hold gap integrity from a run defense standpoint, you're sitting back there now with 8-9 guys, a ton of crowd over a 15, 20-yard radius, not a lot of passing lanes, and you're banking on the quarterback getting antsy and either sort of bailing on the throw and running and scrambling for minimal gain, or forcing a ball that's either going to lead to incompletions or potentially turnovers. And so that's where Kwiatkowski really has made a name for himself, why his scoring defenses are so high in terms of nationally ranked year over year for the better part of 12 to 15 years. So it'd be very interesting to see that scheme here. Now, I will say for 2026, it's going to be sort of an interesting alignment because when you think about the two primary edges coming back in terms of Crawford and Shelby, we haven't really seen Crawford in any type of capacity outside of pure edge and pass rush. And so adding that element of versatility to Crawford's game, look, he's got such a unique body. He's got such a ton of athleticism. But when you haven't done something, there's going to be a development curve there. There's going to be a growth curve there. And so it'll be interesting to see how Crawford handles a potential Kwiatkowski scheme, but also on the other side with Shelby. Shelby has struggled historically when you get him into these wheel routes with running backs, when you sort of get him out in space sometimes. Unfortunately, we saw it last night in the Alamo Bowl as well from time to time. And so, you saw it a ton in that Grinch system. You remember those wheel routes that like Utah was running, wheel routes that Washington was running. Shelby was really struggling keeping up in more of a backer capacity. And that's something that is sort of predicated a staple of the Kwiatkowski system. So you wonder if Kwiatkowski does come here, particularly just in the immediate near term, especially as this recruiting class is still so young and they're going to be developing over the course of their freshman year. Are you going to need to have to hit the portal harder than what Lincoln is sort of suggesting right now to line up the personnel with the scheme? So it's going to be fascinating to see if they do go with Kwiatkowski.
Hey, what's going on, LAFB family? Before we get to the show.
All right, everyone, let's talk about drinking and driving, a decision that will change your whole world. Things will never be the same once you get a DUI because legal fees, time in court are just the beginning. Getting into a crash is another way your world could be irreversibly changed after drinking and driving. Your vehicle may not be the only thing that gets damaged in that crash. You could face a life-altering injury or even death. But you're not the only one who could face those consequences. Your decision to drink and drive could permanently change someone else's world, whether you injure them or leave their loved ones grieving. The next time you're out drinking, call a rideshare, a taxi, a sober friend, or a designated sober driver. Always plan for a safe ride home. The only decision that will change your world for the better is the decision to call for a sober ride. It's never worth it to drive drunk. Don't risk it. Drive sober or get pulled over. Paid for by NHTSA.
Drinking and driving is a decision that will change your whole world. Things will never be the same once you get a DUI because legal fees and time in court are just the beginning. Getting into a crash is another way your world could be irreversibly changed after drinking and driving. Your vehicle may not be the only thing that gets damaged in that crash. You could face a life-altering injury or even death. But you're not the only one who could face those consequences. Your decision to drink and drive could permanently change someone else's world, whether you injure them or leave their loved ones grieving. The next time you're out drinking, call a rideshare, a taxi, a sober friend, or a designated sober driver. Always plan for a safe ride home. The only decision that'll change your world for the better is the decision to call for a sober ride. It's never worth it to drive drunk. Don't risk it. Drive sober or get pulled over. Paid for by NHTSA.
I built this business the old-fashioned way. Hard work and a whole lot of spreadsheets.
Yeah, about that, I upgraded us to Odoo. Odoo puts everything we need, sales, inventory, accounting, on one connected platform. No more juggling systems, no more headaches.
So it all works together?
Exactly.
Odoo is the all-in-one business software that makes running and passing on a business easier than ever. Take your business into the next generation. Try Odoo free at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
So, got to tell you about my friends over at Sleeper. The number one sports app right now, and not just for season-long fantasy. They have daily game updates. They have a live chat that you can chat with other users. Plus, my favorite part is the daily fantasy feature, which is similar to a pick'em. You just choose 2 or more players across any sport. Choose more or less in whatever sport that may be. So if it's football, more or less touchdowns. For Jaden Mayava, if it's Makai Lemon, more or less receptions. If you're looking at the Dodgers, more or less home runs for Shohei Ohtani, really easy, and you can win real money. Right now, when you go and make your first deposit, make sure you use our promo code. You see it right there on the screen, USC LAFB. That's going to give you a match deposit bonus up to $100. You put in $100 to play with, you're going to get $100 free on top of that. You can put in 10, you get 10 free. Also, right now, our friends are offering a $20 free entry for any new signups. If you go sign up today, you'll get both those offers. You get $20 right off the bat free to play with. Plus, use that promo code USCLAFB at sign up and you'll get that match bonus as well. Go to the App Store, Google Play, download the Sleeper app today, and tell them that the USC LAFB sent you. Now, let's get on to the show.
Or do they stay internal? And the internal option, of course, ensures that your recruiting class is super intact, because as great as Kwiatkowski is, it's not what these recruits signed up to play for. He's really good. They're going to have to build their own rapport, their own trust that this scheme works for their skill set. This level of development works for their skill set. And so a little bit of a teething period. You're feeling very confident about containing and maintaining the class, but it's a non-zero probability. You are adding some risk. There's no question about it in terms of getting a new individual, particularly with such a sort of a decorated position that is defensive coordinator. So the alternative is, do you promote internally? I mean, is there an opportunity for Henderson to become the defensive coordinator? Is there an opportunity potentially for somebody else on the staff to make a big jump? So I think that's going to be how they weigh things moving forward. And I'm sure we're going to have it all covered for you on the one and only LAFB channel. So very interesting dynamic here with defensive coordinator. More to come on that, certainly. Now shifting gears, let's talk Alamo Bowl. Obviously, so much going on. Feels like the sky is falling with Trojan Nation. We have such an incredibly passionate fan base, and just so unique to college football, and particularly so unique to the West Coast. It just makes USC so special and such a crown jewel of college football and really college sports in so many ways. There's two schools of thought here. Number one is you're down 13, 14 starters. You can't really take too much from this game. This was a development game. This is a depth game. And, you got to be able to take sort of the results with a slight pinch of salt and really assess individual players, individual circumstances in terms of being able to transfer insights over the course of the 2026 season. The other school of thought is saying, well, okay, you're down all these players, but at the end of the day, you're still favored. You're a 4.5-point favorite according to Vegas, even being down all those players. And you're playing a mediocre at best kind of Big 12 team who's down their starting quarterback, a guy who's waited for 2 years after being at Vanderbilt for a few years to make his first career start at TCU. He's a former walk-on. First career start, you could tell he was sort of limited athletically a little bit, even in terms of mobility, and TCU's still able to get the win. And much like, many things in life, the truth is somewhere in between here. Certainly very disappointing to be able to lose this game. And Tim and I had actually talked about this a couple of weeks ago, that when you thought about 2025 and kind of losing, quote unquote, the games that you were supposed to, in air quotes, that at Notre Dame, at Oregon, places that are just so historically tough for SC to win over these last 15 years. And then you thought there was going to be one other game that they might get tripped up. And most thought it was going to be sort of at Illinois. If you finish kind of 9-3, 10-3 with that, again, you're not ecstatic about the season, but the sky isn't falling, because you're saying, look, you got a really nice win against Iowa, who's looking like they're going to finish the season really strong. You got a nice win on the road, albeit Raiola got hurt and really changed the dynamics of that game, but you won at Nebraska. You were able to beat a true freshman quarterback at home in Michigan. Again, I don't weigh that win at Michigan, home against Michigan, as some others do. This was pretty clearly a rebuilding year with a true freshman quarterback in Michigan. I knew we were going to win that game. We were better. We were at home. That's a game you got to be able to get. But nevertheless, you go to 10-3 in the offseason saying, hey, at least it's trending in the right direction. And Tim and I talked, if something were to happen and there would be a fourth loss this season with the type of schedule that you had, it just totally changes the perception of how you think about 2025 and whether this was a successful season or not. And it kind of has. There still is a ton of emotion and a ton of rawness because this game just happened 12 hours ago. But the reality of the situation is you just think of 9-4 very, very differently with this schedule than you would have with 10-3 and a win in the Alamo Bowl. And I think it comes down to a couple things. Number one is Jaden Maiava. And I think we have to sort of take a step back and say Maiava looked pretty shaky in the Alamo Bowl. One game, one performance. Obviously, he didn't have Batman and Robin, or Batman and Batman, if you will, with Lemon and Lane. Tanook Hines is an absolute star. He's going to be wide receiver 1 next year. 6 catches, 163 yards. He's going to be very, very special. We saw flashes of it. We saw it kind of in that Oregon game, saw it in the Alamo Bowl. We saw it in flashes in the other games. This guy's, leading in the clubhouse in terms of wide receiver number 1, no question about it. But if you look at Maiava's totality of work here over the course of the season, you got to remember the first 4 games of the season was maybe the lightest September that USC has had. I've been a season ticket holder of USC football for 20 years that I can remember in recent memory. You're talking about 2 non-Power 4 teams at home, Missouri State and Georgia Southern. And then you're talking about the absolute bottom of the Big Ten. Let's not forget Purdue, Michigan State, a combined 1-17 in the Big Ten this year. Purdue went 0-9 in the Big Ten. Michigan State went 1-8 in the Big Ten, and they started 0-8. They had to sort of rally that last game of the year against Maryland to avoid being winless. So you're talking about the absolute bottom dwellers of the Big Ten, and historically we know that the bottom of the Big Ten is very, very light. It's a very top-heavy conference. So when you're talking about 2 non-Power 4 schools and 2 of the very bottom in the Big Ten, you're going to look good. And you have talent advantages everywhere. The game is much slower. The game is much calmer. You can be more relaxed. You can be more precise. It's just a different game in September. So you really have to assess Maiava on the final 8 games of the season, because it was the final 8 games of the season that SC played credible Power 4 competition, average and above average Power 4 competition. And in those 8 games, Maiava, unfortunately, 15 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. He had 3 games out of the 8 where he was sub 60% completion, and he only had 2 games out of the 8 where he was clean sheet from a turnover perspective. So 15 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. It was a rather pedestrian year, if we're being completely honest, from Jaden Maiava. Now, I think he made some tremendous strides in the intermediate pass game. I think his ability to find McCree and Lyons in the seam, there were some seam balls this year, and that intermediate pass game and some out routes, some intermediate outs where he had some tremendous touch on the ball, and you saw some great improvement there. But outside of that, you have to understand that his improvement over this course of this season, from the end of, let's call it the Las Vegas Bowl, to the end of the Alamo Bowl, if we take that in totality over a 12-month period, it was very incremental improvement, if we're being completely honest, and lots of ebbs and flows, and 15 touchdowns, 10 interceptions over an 8-game period when you had arguably the best wide receiver duo in all of college football at your disposal. Look, it's probably Lemon and Lane, it's Tate and Smith at Ohio State, Surratt and Cooper at Indiana. Those are your top 3 duos in all of college football. Ironically enough, all 3 of them in the Big Ten, of course. But with the weapons that you had in terms of a first-round NFL pick, third-round NFL pick, I think Lane's going to go in the 3rd round this year. You still were only able to go 15 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. And a lot of the improvement this year was really a function of Lincoln simplifying the playbook, where 85% of Maiava's throws were either 1-read or 2-read throws. So there was a point of emphasis to be able to say, let's just get the ball out quickly. And, that first read, you got a first read on either side of the outside in terms of Lemon and Lane, where you got an advantage, and your second read is probably going to be at the tight end with the seam and get that ball out. And worst case scenario, your third read is going to be a check down with the tight end, with the running back. And, we saw kind of what Sanders, particularly early in the season, was able to do in terms of catching the ball out of the backfield. So, it was really a function of simplifying the playbook. And so you got to wonder now, moving forward in 2026, have we seen enough from Maiava to believe that he is de facto should be the guy in 26 when he doesn't have Lemon and Lane. And we're super high on Tanook Hines. And obviously, Boobie Feaster, the upside is enormous. And Mosley, the upside is absolutely tremendous. But Feaster and Mosley are going to be true freshmen like Hines was a true freshman this year. You're going to see some flashes, but are you going to consistently be able to get quality wide receiver production? Obviously, Jaden Richardson made a phenomenal catch. Louis Riddick called it the catch of the year in college football. It was shades of Jacoby Lane. It was also shades of Kyron Hudson, in the opener against LSU last year. So you've got a ton of talent for sure, but it's raw. And it hasn't sort of produced yet. And even Hines, as excited as we are, this is going to be a big jump going from wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 1. He's off to a tremendous start in terms of his performance with the Alamo Bowl, as we talked about, the 6 for 163. But now you're going to have a whole year of sort of film on you. You're going to get everyone's best cover corner. You're going to have defenses potentially shade your way week over week. This is going to be a different animal. And don't be surprised if there's some growing pains. I think Hines is going to ultimately be a finalist for the Biletnikoff again, in a couple of years and have a bright, decorated future in the NFL. I mean, all the talent is there for that to happen. But for that to happen immediately at the beginning of the 2026 season, look, it may take some time. And again, you're not flanked with 2 guys on either side, right? And you're sort of just flanked with 1 guy. So how is Maeva going to be able to respond in 2026 when he doesn't have advantages on both sides of the field in terms of Lemon and Lane? And then what other knobs can Lincoln really turn to get him significantly improved? Lincoln, I thought, did a really nice job in terms of, again, like we talked about, simplifying the playbook, getting the ball out quickly with him in terms of 1 and 2 read throws, using a lot more 2 tight end personnel to kind of help with the pass protection, but also kind of simplify the offense in terms of his options and where Maeva needs to look at the field. What other knobs can he do? Because it's very unique. This is now going to be Maeva's 4th year in college football, and this is going to be Maeva's 2nd full year as starter in the Lincoln Riley system. How often do we see the jump for a guy who's 4th year in college football and who's going to be 3rd year in the same system? And obviously he only had parts of the Miller Moss year, but this is going to be his 3rd year in the system. How many times do you see an exponential jump with a quarterback given that situation? Most of the time, the cement is kind of hardened. You are who you are. When we think about the big examples of guys blowing up in 1 year, Fernando Mendoza this year, that was year 1 at Indiana, new system. When we think about Cam Ward in Miami, year 1 in the system after being at Washington State. When we think about Jaden Daniels, year 1 at LSU after being at Arizona State. So guys, when they are in the right situation, they kind of explode. And if guys don't explode and it's year 2, year 3 in that same system, you got to wonder what the upside is. And so that then becomes the question is Maeva truly your best opportunity to win in 2026? Or do you go to Hassan Longstreet? And, Longstreet, obviously he's raw. He hasn't had a career start, but man, oh man, the ball just explodes off his hand. The athleticism is through the roof. I mean, he's got that Aaron Rodgers, like lightning release. The kid, just in terms of kind of measurables, feels like, there's an elevation there. And so you got to wonder where this situation is going to be when you think about Lincoln Riley and what his decision is going to be with the quarterback. Because when you're a kid that's that talented, look, I understand the argument that you want to be able to stay in the Lincoln Riley system, given Lincoln Riley's resume of developing quarterbacks. And it's second to none. There's absolutely no question about it. It's undeniable. You have to have, been living under a rock to sort of question Lincoln Riley's resume from a quarterback development standpoint over the last 10 years. But one thing I will say is if you look at Lincoln Riley's quarterback development over the last 3 years, 23, 24, 25, I think there's some questions there, if we're being completely honest. 23, obviously, Caleb, and you're saying, what are you talking about here, madman? I mean, Caleb was the quarterback. But if we look at just the 23 version of Caleb, coming off of that Heisman year, remember, that was the year where he sort of broke every sort of system. He held the ball too long. He was very much in kind of scramble mode. He was trying to make the spectacular play very, very often. He was also kind of mentally already in the NFL and kind of gearing up. He didn't exactly execute Riley's system particularly well. Caleb is potentially going to be the face of the NFL here moving forward. Superstar in the making, if not already. No question about all of that. Heisman Trophy quarterback, argue maybe the greatest quarterback from a talent standpoint in USC history. All undeniable things. But if you just focus on Caleb's 2023 performance in isolation as an independent event, I mean, his numbers were down across the board from his 22 Heisman season. And I don't know if he had a great quarterbacking year to his standards. And I don't know if he developed necessarily with a degree of growth that you would expect from the start of 23 to the end of 23. Now, again, that was all discussed as, look, it's Caleb. He's the number one pick in the draft no matter what. He's already thinking about the NFL. But that was a tough development year, I would think. 24, obviously, we saw the Miller Moss in the Holiday Bowl, and the Miller Moss week 1 against LSU was not the same Miller Moss that ultimately got benched at the end of the year. That was a tough development year for Lincoln Riley, if we're being completely honest, in terms of quarterbacks. Now, the narrative, of course, was Miller Moss isn't mobile, so Lincoln Riley needs a mobile quarterback. He had to adjust his system, given the personnel that he had. And so we gave, much in the way we gave Riley a pass in 23 for QB development, we gave him a pass in 24 for QB development. Now, if you look at Jayden Maiava in the Vegas Bowl, you look at Jayden Maiava in the Alamo Bowl, how much better did Jayden Maiava really get? Now, he had some ebbs where he got better, and then he had some troughs, and it was more of an EKG. But I think you're going into 2026. Lincoln Riley, if you really look at the last 3 years, forget about the stuff before that. That's undeniable. That's absolutely incredible. But over the last 3 years, you could argue Lincoln Riley has not had a great season of QB development. And so if you're sitting there with Hussein Longstreet and you're saying, yeah, it's a guarantee that sitting another year is going to get you where you want to go with Lincoln Riley, I think at the very least you have to question that, given what the last 3 years has been. And you have to have that risk-reward ratio of sitting a second year. How difficult is that going to be for your development? Let's not forget, everyone likes to compare it to sort of the Dante Moore situation. Dante Moore got a lot of reps in that true freshman year at UCLA. It wasn't good. It wasn't, a high level of performance, but I think he learned a lot being on the field. And then him sitting for a year at Oregon, I think gave him a deeper appreciation of viewing the game and assessing the game versus just sitting for 2 years. So that's all to say that I think a major storyline here that we're going to have to keep discussing is what happens between this Maiava and Longstreet situation. And Longstreet, again, not re-signed. Transfer portal opens here in about 36 hours. So that's going to be a really predominant storyline. Now, last thing I'm going to say before I get out of here, I've been talking way too long. Lincoln Riley. Very interesting comments from Riley when you think about this Alamo Bowl and the things that he said where, look, it's taken me essentially, and I'm paraphrasing here, 4 years to set the chess pieces on the board the way they need to be. Now the window is open for contention. And I walked away with that comment, I'll be very honest with you, as someone who's been very objective with Riley, been hard on Riley over a couple of years, but also have been, very praiseworthy of him when he's done a great job, is I walked away very concerned with those comments because I go back to the stat that 14 of the 17 national championship coaches since 2000, there's 17 coaches that have won a national championship since 2000. 14 of those 17 either won the national championship or played for the national championship in the championship game within 4 years. The only 3 exceptions were Dabo Swinney at Clemson, and Clemson is not a blue blood. And so it's going to take him a lot longer to build something. And he got his first national championship, I believe, year 8, year 7. Mac Brown at Texas. And you can argue whether Mac Brown should be on the list at all. Hashtag Vince's knee was down. And then the third is Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. Everyone likes to talk about year 7 winning the national championship there. Look, I got to be honest with you. Harbaugh cheated. I mean, it's just clear as day. That's my position on it. Michigan cheated those 3 years that they were in the playoff. Look at what Michigan was, 3-4 years prior to that 3-year window, and look at the state of what Michigan football is these last 2 years. Look at the way they were able to score in big games in that 3-year window, and look at the way they've been able to score outside of that. There was a lot of fishy things going on. So that's all to say that when you know what you're doing, the vast, vast, vast majority of the time, this happens very quickly. you win at the highest level very, very quickly. I mean, think about Kirk Cignetti, year 2 at Indiana, number 1 seed in the college football playoff. Think about Kalen DeBoer, year 2 at Washington in the college football national championship game. So you can argue all you want about NIL and transfer portal, but at the end of the day, this is still USC. This is a school that has unparalleled history in football and a donor base that has been in this all of the 1960s and all the 1970s. You basically have 20 consecutive classes at USC in the 60s and 70s that were a part of a national championship team or very close to being a part of a national championship team. That's your donor base. So when you've got that level of donor base, that level of history, it shouldn't be taking this long. And I think what's so fascinating is over the course of this offseason, I think Riley is going to have a microscope on him that, truth be told, he should have probably had last season. But the arrival of Chad Bowden, like, let's think about it. Chad Bowden came in end of January, early February. The arrival of Chad Bowden made it such that the narrative shifted, right? And Bowden came on and just caught fire. What an incredible spring it was last year in terms of all of these unbelievable recruiting gets. The narrative shifted. The seat kind of cooled for Lincoln. Lincoln was sort of in the background from a narrative standpoint. Now it became all about the recruiting class, and what the future is. And now you're in a situation where you're back again on the spotlight. And to me, it's got to be college football playoff appearance or bust in year 5. This is going to be year 5 for Lincoln Riley. And where I am a bit perplexed at Riley's comments is saying the window is now open. You're banking on a lot of freshmen here. And this is a number 1 recruiting class, no question about it. But how many of these individuals as freshmen are going to be consistent high-level performers for you? Chances are not many. They're going to be great players down the line, no question about it. But for the 2026 season, what kind of an influx of talent are you really getting relative to the overall potential? I think it's going to be a fraction of the overall potential. And look who's leaving. When you talk about Lemon and Lane leaving the door offensively, McCree, Lyons, obviously you're really excited about Bowman. But, you're talking about your top 2 tight ends, your top 2 receivers on the offensive side of the ball. When you look at it defensively, losing Lucas, losing Gentry, losing Ramsey, losing Fitzgerald, losing DeCarlos Nicholson. These are significant pieces. And you're losing all of that. And you're banking on a recruiting class to step on from day one and give you that impact to sort of open your window. And at the same time, Riley, over the last 4 or 5 days, has said that, look, we don't plan to be as active in the transfer portal this year as we were last year. Translation is we've put a lot of our resources into this recruiting class from a money standpoint. The money is not quite there to be able to go after all these big names in the transfer portal. We're going to have to pick and choose. So where I'm getting stuck is that if you're not going to have a significant influx of talent from the transfer portal in 2026, you've had a pretty significant outflux of talent in terms of guys that are leaving. And, your number 1 recruiting class is all true freshmen. How are you making this decision that this is now apparently the year that the window opens? I mean, if anything, what he's saying is he's almost setting himself up where he says, well, these guys are true freshmen in year 5. It really is year 6 and year 7 is going to be where the peak of my window is, right? I mean, it was very interesting language. The window has opened. Okay, it's not saying that the window is at its peak. It's just saying the window has sort of opened. You could interpret that as the window has cracked open, where he's almost sort of setting it up where it's really year 6, year 7, year 8 is where I'm going to be in the sweet spot of my coaching success here at USC, which to me is just frankly unacceptable. Where in a day and age that we've just seen it with guys like Cignetti and DeBoer, even though the landscape of college football has changed, you're talking about year 7, year 8, when we're talking about USC here. This is not UCLA football. This is not Cal football. This is not, another program here. This is one of the truly iconic blue blood 6, 7, 8 programs in the country. It should not, if you know what you're doing, it should not take this long at USC. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out in the offseason with Lincoln Riley. A lot of questions, but I think the pressure needs to be on him because You cannot be in a position here making the kind of money that he's making at $10 and $11 million a year, saying the kind of things that he said at the beginning of his tenure of this being the mecca of college football, and accept anything less than a college football playoff appearance, which is just a top 12 finish in year 5. So, but it's also interesting as to what exactly has changed between year 4 and year 5. It's the recruiting class. So you're really banking on so many of these guys as freshmen to just sort of step on and make an immediate impact. And let's hope so. Let's hope that's the case. But I wonder if that's really a rational expectation. So, friends, lots more to come there. I talked way longer than I thought I would. These episodes will get tighter. I promise you that. But, hadn't talked to you in so long. Missed you guys. So wanted to get on and share some thoughts on all of these different topics. There's never a dull moment, is there, in USC football land? So I'm sure all of these topics are going to evolve in a significant way. And like I said, just wishing everyone, the Trojan family, all the fans of LAFB, and just all the supporters of USC and USC football, just a very happy, safe, and joyous new year. Hope you're getting everything you want out of this holiday season. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. Ryan's done such incredible work for this channel over the years, and certainly over this last year, as has my main man, Tim Prangley. And, just the one-of-one that is Tim with the call-in show. So I'm really excited about this Mondays with Madman segment. Hope you support it. And as always, fight on.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening. Happy holidays! Want to give your host a gift? Consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing the show this holiday season. It really helps the show grow. From all of us at Believe, have a Merry Christmas, everyone, and a Happy Holiday.